That's a funny question because recovery is really a continuum. Recovery is a lifetime thing. We're all on a journey of self-improvement and growing and learning and having all sorts of setbacks. But with that being said, there is an important need for the person who wants to go into this work to be in a place where they feel like they can maintain that 10-hour, 20-hour, 40-hour work week. This job might not be physically demanding, but it's extremely mentally and emotionally demanding. If you care about the job, even more so. There's a lot of burnout that can come with the role. And it's not just the peer support workers, doctors get it, nurses, police, firefighters, clinicians. When you're helping people and you're usually helping them when they're not at their best stages in their life or they're going through things, it can be exhausting. And you're working your hardest to give them the best you got. And so the idea is that you want to be in your place where, in a place where you feel like you can maintain a level of healthiness by doing the things you're already doing, having moved past a lot of the stuff that you would consider your lived experience, and then being able to realistically perform that self-care and do the things you need to do so that when you do get that burnout, that will happen, you can't avoid it, that you're prepared for that. And so I know another part of the question was, what happens if I have a quote unquote relapse or a setback or something happens or I get sick? I've had some bad experiences with this, unfortunately, for other places that I've worked with or supervisors that I've had. And so the lesson I learned, here's some peer support. The lesson I've learned is that if you can in advance build in things, which you would learn from something like REP, for example. So for example, for me, if I'm starting to notice certain things, I activate certain, well, I guess you want to call them interventions or things that I want to do. If I know that I'm going to be out and I might not be well enough to be the one that calls so that I don't get a no call, no show, I assign somebody who I know is going to find out what's going on with me, and they then communicate on my behalf. So that's just a little example of things you can do to prepare yourself should you have that relapse or that setback. And the idea is that when you're hired, I would really recommend to speak with your direct supervisor. And it might not be right away in the beginning, but really have a frank conversation to the level you feel comfortable with, saying, look, these are some of my challenges. These are some of the things that's happened to me before. This is stuff that might be tough for me. And maybe I haven't built a skill for this yet, or maybe I have, but you never know. Something might happen. I might have a death that triggers me, and then that creates a snowball effect, right? And the idea is to have that conversation in advance so that hopefully your place you work for or your direct supervisor has a good sense of what to look out for, how to best support you, and should you have that setback, what can be done in the meantime while you're away. A lot of times you'll have to get FMLA, which is a type of paperwork that allows you to miss work because of medical reason where they can't fire you because of it. They might not have to pay you, but you can't get let go just because you had a relapse or you needed to have to stay in the hospital for a week or something like that. So yes, you do have to be somewhat prepared to do the peer support role. If you can't share your lived experiences and things you've been through without crying about it or thinking about it for the next 3 days, you're probably not completely moved on from that thing yet. And so maybe don't use that. If you feel like a lot of that is what you've been through, you might not be ready. You might start in as a volunteer or doing something a little bit more light than super intense direct care. And by intense, I mean like 20, 40 hours a week of working with a caseload of 10, 15, 20 people. So that would be my advice in terms of gauging where you are at before you decide to jump in and where you want to jump in, and then preparing for the possibility or the eventuality that you might be in a place where you might have a pretty significant setback and have those things in place so that you can contain the effects that that might have and come back even stronger when you're ready.
Great, Gus. On another sort of like flip side of that, I found that when I started working in the peer specialist field that there was a bit of relief in some of my symptoms, because in supporting other people, I was able to step outside myself and actually see some of the progress that I'd made that maybe I was unaware of to that point, sort of like, pieces of other people's stories. And I would be staring across the table at someone who was struggling in similar ways that I had. And here I am in a different place with it. And then I'm able to offer and share resources that worked for me and might be helpful to them. And I think that, being there for someone else in their struggles sometimes takes us out of our own for a moment, which can be, in its own way therapeutic, right? To be there for someone else and not have to be thinking about our own things. And also there's some accountability with that, getting out of bed on a day that's difficult can become easier if you know that you have someone waiting for you that really is relying on you being there. So there are some struggles to make sure that you're in a place to, be ready to do this. But I often think that sometimes there's like that like little voice in your head saying, well, I might not be ready because like I'm not fully there. But actually being there for someone else in that way and holding space with someone else in that way can end up actually putting you in a better space when it comes to some of your mental health symptoms, and you're feeling good about yourself and you're doing something that's rewarding to you and you have a passion for, and that raises that dopamine and gives you that lift that you might not have if you hadn't have taken the leap, so to speak.
Would add to that. So I've done a lot of public speaking on being in recovery, and what I find is that there's this built-in assumption in, um, you know, being employed, working. There's this assumption that I'm healthy, and that means I'm always healthy. I'm well, which means I'm always well. And that's just the baseline assumption for anybody who's working. And being not well enough to come into work is a bad, terrible exception that means you're doing something wrong. And working as a peer specialist, there's a built-in expectation that I'm a human being and I have limits. And there's room for me to take care of myself, which is wonderful, and everybody should have it. I know that we have a culture of, hoarding sick days because we're bad workers if we use them. And as a peer support specialist, my supervisor knows that I have ongoing presenting issues that I have to take care of, and that is my responsibility and my right to prioritize. And so I see it as sort of liberating to work as a peer specialist, for it to be assumed that I'm going to have to periodically prioritize my health over, being able to show up for work or having to cut back on hours sometimes, in ways that other roles across all sectors really don't have permission to do that, because there's this ableist assumption that people don't have chronic issues that they're managing.
Showing that you've struggled or are currently going through struggles and still showing up and still, being a member of society, just showing the vulnerability without perfection can kind of gain some respect and trust with the client. So it can kind of be a positive in this world, where in other work areas it's not utilized like that, but I think it can gain respect in this world.